In terms of the public safety work table that Joe Farrow and I both sit on from the Highway Patrol, that work table at our last Board of Governors conference, we signed a memorandum of agreement to start providing e-trace, gun tracing training to state law enforcement officials. That's now going to elevate to governors to sign off on from the 10 border states in our next meeting. We are also going to be using some of our stimulus funds to help fund the Highway Patrol, the Attorney General's office, some sheriff's offices, and particularly here in San Bernardino and Imperial and San Diego counties, firearm task forces. One of the good news stories about Secretary Napolitano's visit earlier this month to Mexico, the President's visit upcoming, we're going to see a lot more southbound inspections on both the U.S. side and the Mexican side. These frankly, it should be a profit center for whoever does these inspections, because the drugs flow north, the cash and the guns flow south. And it's been a bit surprising that there hasn't been more searching on the Mexican side, because there's a hell of a lot of money to be made. And I think it is basically through forfeiture. The unfortunate thing on the Mexican side is that the corruptive influence was there, that we know why some of the searches weren't being done for a long time. But we've committed 360 additional Border Patrol agents to work on the south side to beef up their inspection process there, and we're probably going to be doing a lot more random inspections on our side of the border for southbound traffic. Working with the Highway Patrol, we're also going to be putting together a 24/7 sort of border dispatch center. What this is there's a communication problem. One, Mexican law enforcement wants access to our databases here in the United States. Because of their corruption problem down there, we're not going to give them access to our law enforcement databases here. So there needs to be a way for us to have a verified system. They need to know for information, whether it's kidnappings, car thefts, all sorts of crimes that happen on a cross-border basis, and to have a one-stop shop where their law enforcement can pick up the phone and find out who is this U.S. person, is there a record for what information can we have, and then have an audit trail to make sure that the information is being used for the right lawful purposes. So we're hoping to have that up and running by this summer before the Board of Governors Conference. And it's going to be a pilot, just at first between Baja California and California. The foundation will be laid for all 10 border states ultimately to be using that. And we're putting together a grant application for burn grant funding to, at first we're going to have to pick up the cost of having the dispatchers, people answering the phone internally, but we're looking to get the federal funding to have those analysts and dispatchers with burn grant funding. We're going to be submitting that application later this month. It's May 6th, I forget which is the due date. It's either at the end of the month or May 6th. Human trafficking is another area, obviously a priority for the First Lady and emphasis at the last Board of Governors Conference. There were a number of pieces of legislation that were passed on human trafficking. There were a number of great studies that were done in terms of problems that all resulted in 6 human trafficking task forces throughout the state to deal with this, with nonprofit organizations doing this work. And that's critical because the nonprofit organizations have access to this community, which is fearful of the police by and large because of things that they've been told, and they also know that they're here illegally, so it makes their victimization worse. So we're looking to get burn grant funding to help sustain the human trafficking task forces, and then also support the work of the task force that we want to have with all the Board of Governors working on the human trafficking issue. Last issue I want to report back on is training. And then we have some EPA representatives here. They've been very helpful with U.S. Department of Defense, NORCOM, and NORAD. We've been, in our own California Specialized Training Institute, we've been putting on all sorts of seminars across the southern border in Mexico Mexican first responder fire departments, training up and certifying them in hazardous material response, something that they don't get the training in Mexico, something given their chemical plants and their needs. And so it's not only been great to have them trained up for this, but through the effort of DOD, State Department, and EPA, the funding's there, but not only do we provide the training, we also then leave them the equipment that they need to be able to respond to chemical things, which is good news for all of us, given the chemicals and fumes and spills and all of those things that don't respect boundaries. So that's it for my updated report on those issues. We'll be back for you. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you very much. It's very informative. Any questions for Secretary Bettenhausen? A lot going on there. Thank you very much, ma'am. Secretary Kawamura, I know one of the things we talked about last time was the issue of invasive species, so maybe you could update the group on where we are, because we have a council dealing with that issue.
I will do that. And in fact, unfortunately, I wish I could say things have improved tremendously, and I wouldn't have already did that a little bit tougher. This last year we found, unfortunately, both not only the cloud mussels up in some of our systems here in the out of the Colorado system, but cloud mussels in addition, and the zebra mussel find up in the Northern California area in an isolated reservoir. Entire challenge with invasive species, and I'll address one that's down here between this area and Mexico, which is the Asian citrus psyllid. But let me describe. Just in this last month, we were able to form finally an invasive species council here for the state of California. Other states have invasive species councils, and also there's the national invasive species. But with the enormous influx of globalization and trade going both ways, especially incoming, the amount of potential for pathways for invasive species, which would be insects, diseases, plants, animals, and in all of these areas, these invasive species can cause tremendous impacts, certainly, of course, to agriculture, and you can find that in two ways, where you have a disease that comes in and takes down your crop or takes down an animal population, or you could have a quarantine because you have a fruit fly or some other kind of a pest that your other trading partners and other trading states don't want. And so suddenly you can have a region that is completely shut down from moving products in or out without a certain protocol. The invasive species struggle then it is really something that's globalized, and now with global warming, a lot of the impacts of what will happen both invasive species and native species that are no longer contained by frost or other kinds of native beneficial insects. These are some of the challenges we face. So the Invasive Species Council is made up of 6 different agencies. It's made up of EPA because there's certainly damages and dangers to endangered species. Invasive species can cause a lot of threat to them. It's made up with our partners at BTH, Caltrans, folks who have the burden, responsibility of making sure our roadways and right-of-ways are free from weeds, noxious weeds, rodents, and different kinds of pests that can undermine infrastructure, and certainly noxious weeds are a huge part of that. We work with health services, and the best example is West Nile virus, a zoonotic disease that crosses and jumps over between animals and humans, and that's a good example as it exists. And the work with mosquito vector control and abatement, and mentioning those tires as a mosquito reservoir is a very important thing. We certainly work with resource agencies because in our situation, many of these pests, while they might not affect the crops that you're growing, they might affect the forest canopies, which in turn would affect the watershed. So whether it's a gypsy moth, which we're currently doing eradication up in the Ventura, Ojai area for a gypsy moth, or some of these other pests that can come into the forest canopy, set and oak that, and then all the very many noxious weeds that show up. Arondo, I noticed in this, your watershed here is a big problem. I don't think you have Spartina yet, but if you ever get a true good flow of water here, that may come in as well. It'll be a problem for you as an aquatic non-native species. All of these things, and I mentioned